Hello, welcome back to Maverick Mind. What a joy and pleasure to be back behind the mic here with you guys and ready to share another interview. It's been a while since I've shared an interview on this show, and there's a few reasons why. Most of you, if you follow me closely, will know that a few months ago I launched a new platform. It's called Ember. And I've been pouring my little heart out into creating that space into the best that it can be so I can start to share it in a bit more of a wider way. For those who haven't seen it yet, Ember is a new online studio focused around mental health and well-being, specifically just for creatives. So it's the first of its kind. I've never seen anything quite like it in the kind of well-being space to be completely focused only on creativity, the creative mind, and barriers that we all come up with. So inside, you'll find yoga classes, there's meditations, breath work, somatic healing, which is something that I've developed from a tool that I use within coaching. Somatic coaching, I've developed it into a class to help you guys. There's live classes on demand. There's like 100 and something odd classes in there now, and that is what I've been putting a lot of energy into the last few months, and I'm so excited to now kind of push it out a little bit more. So I'm going to leave a link in the show notes for you guys to check it out. Also a link to a free mini retreat that you can take. So it's 4 different classes there that are a little kind of mini retreat you can put yourself through if you're feeling overwhelmed, if you're feeling a bit creatively blocked, or like you don't really know where to turn next. Then that retreat will honestly change everything, and it's completely free. So check the link in the description for that. But that aside, I'm really excited, and it's kind of weirdly amazing timing this episode because we're coming off the back of what I think may be one of the best, most exciting new weeks in new music that I have witnessed in a very, very long time, maybe even ever. But that might be an overstatement, I'm not sure. But last week we had the release of Lily Allen's album, the first in 7 years, I think. But aside from that, we also had Rosalia's Berghain, from reggaeton to singing opera in German when she's a Spanish woman, Catalan woman actually. And then we also had Dave the Rapper's album, which if you haven't checked it out, is so good. So I'm very, 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 very proud of the musicians of the world. I'm proud to be English because of Dave and Lily Allen, but also proud to live in Catalonia because of Rosalia. It's just a real artistry, and I think it was a week that got everyone listening to full albums again, rather than just listening to playlists, which I'm totally guilty of as well. But I love listening to a whole body of work. A whole album is just my love language. So off the back of what I think has been such a positive week in music, today's guest is actually from the music industry, and he is really, again, a champion of that authenticity within music and connection that we can create through musicians. So I'm so excited to introduce you to Tom Kwiat. He is a filmmaker, a storyteller, and the founder of Live and Amplified, a movement that has been a shining light on independent musicians for around a decade now. He's originally from Chicago, but is now based in Texas, and he was actually born with cerebral palsy. And in his own words, he's kind of lived a life of several people. He turned what has been seen as quite a big limitation into a deep well of resilience, perspective, and abundant creativity. And we talk about loads of stuff on the show. We talk about how Live and Amplified began as a simple idea to share the unseen stories behind music, and how now it's growing into a really thriving platform built on authenticity and connection. Tom really opens up about what it really takes to stay committed to your craft, why mindset is everything, and why he believes that the future of many creative channels is rooted within human connection, which I think is a really interesting topic, because I think a lot of us, though the internet is so great, I think the next layer will be going back to the roots and back to just in-person meetings, in-person gigs, in-person conversations. And so this conversation is really about finding your voice, carving out your own path, and never giving up no matter what. So I'm really excited to see what you think of this episode. It was an absolute joy to meet Tom. So without any further ado, Tom Kwiat, a massive warm welcome to Maverick Mind. Tom, a massive, massive warm welcome to Maverick Mind. I'm so excited to have you here.
Excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
I want to dive into so many parts of your story because I think that you've said, you've lived many, many lifetimes in this one life. But I kind of want to begin with just what you were saying before we hit recording is that your business or your kind of movement is coming towards its 10-year anniversary live and amplified. And I really
Yeah.
want to begin maybe just explaining a little bit about what that's all about.
Yeah, so Live and Amplified was an interesting jumping off point because the original idea started in 2013 when I was living in so I'm originally from Chicago, but now I live in Texas, but at this time I was living in Kentucky. You'll find out I've moved several different times throughout my life. And there's a group of guys that were doing a thing helping promote independent musicians, and I thought that was really cool. I didn't necessarily want to get involved in their thing because there was already like seven people pretending to be in charge of that, and I was like, that just feels like a mess. I'm going to let that be what it is. And then when my opportunity comes, I will see what I can do with it. And so that's kind of the spark that started everything. And then a few years later, I was living out in New Mexico, hanging out with my buddy. He owned a recording studio, and we're sitting there. We're talking with a couple of heavy metal guys. They were in a heavy metal band. They had just gotten done recording, and they were talking about something that happened on a tour that they'd just gotten off of. And I was like, man, this is a really cool story that not a lot of people hear because these aren't stories that people share, right? It's like something that happens on tour is just something that happens on tour. And I wanted to kind of start sharing some of these stories because it was really interesting, really engaging. And I'm sure if these guys that were in New Mexico had stories, every musician had stories. So I talked to my buddy Jeff. I was like, hey, I've had this idea for a video series where we record musicians doing like performances of their songs, and then they talk about the songs, and if they have like cool little stories, we get that too, and then we just kind of put it together in a 20 to 30 minute. At this time it wasn't a podcast, but it was like a video series. And he's like, I love the idea, not right now though, I can't get involved. Fair enough. 6 months later, things happen with his recording studio that he was working at, and he's like, hey, that idea, now I can do it. And so from there we started locally in Roswell, New Mexico, where we were living at the time, and then we started spanning out, and 10 years later, here we are.
I love that because, as you say, like, I think there's been a long time in loads of different creative kind of niches or creative little
Yep.
pockets where the behind the scenes, like the going on tour and things, have kind of been kept a secret. Like you're not really
Hmm.
supposed to be seen like behind this veil or something. But it's actually so interesting to hear kind of what happens when you're on tour and like maybe the crazy things that happen or maybe what brings bands together and things like that. I think it's so inspiring.
Yeah, it was, it was just one of those moments where, like, I'm very big on feeling the vibes of the moment, and when something authentic comes together, you got to just run with it, and that's kind of what happened. Was it was just like a really authentic moment that came together, and it honestly, because me and him had worked together so much prior in other iterations on films and stuff like that, it was like, hey, I've got this idea. He's like, cool. I got this, this, and this. We can get the audio recorded sounding really good. I was like, cool. I've got this and this camera, and we can do the video production really well. And it literally, something that you'd think would take like weeks and months to kind of plan, we had together in like 3 days, and we were ready to go. So it
Wow.
was just like we were in the right place at the right time for everything to come together. Now, yes, was it all kind of thrown together because we were in our, or at that time I was in my early 30s, or no, late 20s. He was in his late 30s, and we didn't have a whole lot of money. So yes, everything was kind of very mismatched and thrown together, but we had everything we needed, and we just kind of ran with it. So
Yeah, I mean, I think when it's things are like that, it's kind of twofold. Like when that idea comes and you get that like full body, like, oh my God, I need to do that right now. And you
Yeah.
can just somehow, I think like creatives have this like superhuman ability to just throw it together if they don't
Yep.
have like the fears blocking us and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
Um, but also that's another thing, is that you had the courage to let it kind of grow from that messy
Mhm.
pace, where I think
Yeah.
sometimes we get stuck in the, I have this big vision of, I want it to be like this, and if it's not like that on day one, a lot of us
Yeah.
kind of get stuck.
Oh yeah. I mean, it would have been very when we had when I first talked to him. So everything kind of started unfolding in late November of 2015 was when we had the idea, or we went ahead and said, okay, yes, let's do this. But when we had our initial conversation, it was like early summer. So we're talking like maybe late March, early April, May, somewhere in that ballpark. And I could have easily walked away and just been like, okay, he doesn't want to do it. I'll find the next thing. And because I knew what situation he was going through, and I knew he was actually like, I could tell from his mannerisms. My buddy Jeff, who's my business partner in all this, um, it just worked. And I put all my fears about like, okay, this is never going to happen aside. And I just kind of waited for that time to come around. And it's like going to what you said, just kind of being okay with the fact that at the beginning it's not going to be perfect, but we'll get there. So,
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think any kind of really great business, great artist, great creator, great story starts off like a little bit messy.
absolutely, 100%.
And I think also we then encounter mess at many, many points along the journey, that's for sure.
Right. I 100% agree. But it's the ability to be okay with it, knowing that we're just beginning and it's going to get better as long as we want it to get better.
Yeah, what do you think has kept you going for like 10 years now doing that?
Um, well, at this point, it's more of I've already put 10 years into it. Why stop? But I think initial like this is kind of an interesting part of the conversation because after 2 years, we really didn't have a whole lot of momentum. We were doing okay in like the New Mexico scene, which it's a decent music scene, but it's not like Nashville or Austin,
Mm.
close to where I live now, or like some of these big music city hubs. And so we had a little bit of buzz going there. Like people that were important knew who we were, but we really didn't have a huge following. And so I left New Mexico in 2017 because my job in New Mexico just wasn't paying the bills. And I was like, I need to go, and whatever happens with Live and Amplified happens. And just the pure like the 2 years that I was away from New Mexico, or like I say away from New Mexico, I technically still am, but I live a lot closer now than I did. Um, those would have been the 2 years that Live and Amplified just would have went away because it was me by myself. This and it would have been very easy for me to just walk away from it. But then once like the pandemic hit, so yeah, like once the pandemic hit and we still kind of had a little bit of traction going, so we were still doing our thing, and the pandemic hits and everybody has all this free time on their hands. I was like, okay, now is our time to double down and really keep it going. And then the 2 years that we were in lockup, quarantine, like whatever you want to call it, we really started gaining some traction. And it's like, okay, now we can't stop.
Yeah, I guess because that time people couldn't go out to see a band or
Yeah.
watch a performance and stuff.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So it was a lot of luck, good timing, because like coming. So in 2017, I moved from Roswell, New Mexico. I moved to Florida to be closer to my parents because they'd moved to Florida some years ago, and they were like, "You got to move closer to us. We want to, we want you closer." And I'm like, "Okay." I took their advice and I moved closer, and it didn't end up working out the way I wanted to. And so I ended up moving back closer to New Mexico so I could be like, hey, this live and amplified thing, even though the last 2 years we haven't been putting a whole lot of effort into it, we've still got some traction. So I need to see where this goes. And then the pandemic hits and it's like, okay, game time, let's go. So
Yeah. Awesome. And kind of like backtracking maybe a little bit, what kind of drew you to the music industry? I mean, you've said like different things about like
yeah,
recording studios and friends and bands and stuff.
yeah.
What kind of brought you into that space?
I don't know to be 100% because like, so growing up, music like modern music wasn't a thing that I listened to all that like I grew up in the 90s and so yes we'd listen to like the top 40 stations so you had like your hip hop and your Britney Spears your NSYNC you Dr. like I'll sit there and just name off whatever top 40 band I could think of but so we had that and that's what we listened to but as far as like independent music, outside of the a neighbor of ours that had a band, that was the extent of like independent music that we knew. And so anytime I would go out and about, it was like, okay, just whatever the top 40 is. And that was kind of the extent of my music. And then when I moved to Kentucky, or no, yeah, when I moved to Kentucky, I started getting introduced to a lot of like this independent music scene, and I was like, I don't know what all this is, but let's start seeing, let's see what it's about. And they introduced me to some bands that were independent and like not getting played on the radio, so like independent bands. And I was like, okay, that's really cool. And then when I moved out to New Mexico, that's all they really had to do out there because there's not a lot to do in New Mexico other than drugs, make kids, or you listen to music. And so the independent scene was just kind of like my thing to do on Friday nights. It was like, oh, hey, so and so's band's playing over at the brewery. Let's go. And that's just kind of how I got in and just like the warm welcoming. It was like, okay, you know, so.
Nice. Well, before that, like, have you always been a creative of some kind, or was it just something that you found when you
I,
started to find that independent scene?
I've always tried. I wouldn't say I've always been a creative. I've always tried creative things. So when I was in grade school, um, anytime we had like a class project or a class presentation, I was always that kid that when people are doing like PowerPoints and just doing like the same old thing, I wanted to do something different. So I remember, um, have you read the book The Outsiders?
No, I don't think I have.
Okay, so there's this book called The Outsiders. It's about uh it's in like 1950s rural America about two rival gangs. Not really like not gangs like you think about today, but just like gangs. And basically just kind of the confrontation between them and about that. So I I remember we had to do a presentation on this book and it was like, hey, you've got 10 minutes, you got to talk about the book or a certain aspect of this book. And I'm like, okay, cool. And so I wanted to do something different and I did like a radio show that was like talking about like it was almost like this. It was almost like a podcast in like the 90s talking like an open discussion talking about this book. It made no sense, but it was completely different from what everybody else was doing. And my teacher was like, hey, it was rough, but you did something completely so outside the box that I'm going to give you an A on this. And I'm like, sweet, I love that. And so, like, I've always done I wouldn't say I was always a creative, but I always tried to do creative things.
Yeah, well, I think that is kind of like that is being a creative in a way, because I think
Yeah.
like staying creative anyway, something that
Yeah.
we really have to tap into is like, I don't know where that little symbol came from, is being playful with whatever we're doing.
Yeah.
And, thinking, especially if it's something like at school, when you sometimes have to do things you don't want to do, or sometimes
Yeah.
you have to do things you find a bit boring. How can I make this fun
Yeah.
or more
100%.
interesting?
Yeah. 100, and I think school was kind of my out in a world where, especially, I don't know how school is viewed where you're at, but I know in America there's like this huge like contention point, where is school worth it? Is school conditioning you to think one way, or is school conditioning you to think another way? So like that's a very interesting contention point. But I think for me, school kind of gave me the opportunity to explore creative outlets that let like even though I say I wasn't always creative, school gave me that outlet to kind of find my creative voice and become a creative, if that makes sense.
Mm. Yeah, definitely. I think it does make sense. And I think that it really depends on what school you're going to. And I
Yeah.
think, as you say, it is different in every country. And there's definitely that debate sometimes in England. But then there's also different kind of ways of
Yeah.
schooling starting to pop
Yep.
up that are supposed to create more creative or maybe
Oh,
open-minded kids and stuff. But I would say I'm kind of the same. Like I went to a normal school.
yeah. Yeah.
um, but I think that sometimes if you have it in you just to see the world a little bit differently
Mhm.
anyway, you're going to make everything unusual. You're going to
Yeah.
be
Well,
thinking up something new anyway because it's just the way that your mind is sometimes.
yeah. 100%. I agree.
Yeah. And like, I want to dive into too growing up with a disability because you
Yeah.
were born with cerebral palsy. What was
Yep.
that like kind of growing up with or going to school with?
So the early years, like, so this kind of falls into two different parts where I was a young child and my parents did most of my thinking, or like try just like it was more parent driven. And then once I got into like right before high school, I started becoming an independent thinker and doing things my way. Early on, it was a relatively normal childhood. I played baseball. I had some friends on the street that I grew up on, and we hung out, we did our thing. We'd play like street hockey or basketball or baseball or, like whatever it was. Um, and it wasn't, I knew I was different, but it wasn't a thing because anybody that was on the street that was around my age knew who I was and knew like, hey, yes, he's got his situation going on, but he's a normal kid, so we're going to treat him like a normal kid. So we would fight, they would pick on me, I'd pick on them, just normal adolescent kid stuff, right? And so I had kind of set me up as I got older to kind of just like, okay, no matter what happens, just treat me like normal. Like anytime I'd get introduced to a new friend group, or as obviously as you grow older, your friend groups kind of change or multiply or evolve or whatever you want to call it. And so I always said, just treat me like you would treat anybody else. Now, yes, sometimes that got out of hand and some things happen, but that is what it is. But I would say growing up, living with a disability, other than, some points in the early years where I was, in like disability baseball, like there's a disability baseball league. So it was like kids with like learning disabilities or physical disabilities. It was just like, they call it the Challenger Baseball League. Outside of that, in my early years, from like sixth grade moving forward, it was a relatively normal childhood. Like I had normal. I hate using the word normal, but that's just kind of the best way I can describe it. It was a regular upbringing for the most part. So
Yeah. For somebody maybe listening who doesn't know like how having cerebral palsy could affect somebody,
mm,
like how does it affect you? Because I know that's
yeah,
there's kind of degrees of it, right?
yeah. So for me, you'll notice as we're talking, I talk a lot with my right hand. That's because I've limited, like I have mobility with the left side of my body, but like my left arm, it's like imagine a brand new rubber band. You know how you got
Mm.
like 10. So the simplest way to explain it is imagine from your shoulder down to your elbow and then your elbow to your wrist, the tightest rubber band you've ever tried to open or whatever, and that's kind of what my tendons feel like in my left arm and left leg. And basically what it is it's from what I've gathered, I've tried to do research and be more educated on the situation, but I'm not a doctor, and trying to figure out what's actually going on isn't always the easiest thing. But it's a bruise on my brain that is firing, like there's a disconnect from my brain to my the left side of my body essentially.
Right. And that's like, obviously, it kind of is a testament to your upbringing that you have the
Mhm.
mindset that you have of just like, I'm just going to be quote unquote normal. No one's
Yeah,
normal, but
yeah,
like whatever that means, and to be treated as normal and to just continue kind of creating the
yep,
life that you desire on that terms.
yep,
Because I've met so many people that kind of have probably lesser degree disabilities or like learning
yeah,
disabilities and stuff that really then use it as a label or
hmm,
as a excuse.
yeah,
um but you really
yeah,
haven't.
yeah. Well, and that's the thing is, especially once I got older, I definitely ran into those people that they were like, "Oh, you should come hang out with us because we're also the special people." They would always call me a special person, and I'm like, I'm not special. Like, I know what you're saying. You're trying to create this group of inclusion, like where everybody's accepted and all that stuff, and I appreciate that. But I'm no different than anybody else. There's not like, yes, physically, there's stuff that I can't do that maybe you can do or the guy down the street can do. But at the end of the day, if I put my mind to it, I'll figure out a way to get it done. Like, that there's no way around it. So like especially once I got into high school and college and like more advanced education, there was always people that were like, "Hey, we've got a special group that meets on Thursdays or whatever. You should come join us." And I'd go, and it would just kind of be this not woe is me type meeting, but it's like it was almost like a support group, which I get it. Like there's a lot of people that need that, but when you're sitting there and that's all you talk about is like how you feel bad for one another, it's like that's not going to help anybody get anywhere, in my opinion. Like I don't know it, but I definitely understand where you're like when you're saying there's people that use it as a label and as like an identifier. I try and definitely not do that. So
Yeah, I actually kind of like as you were speaking, then I was just thinking, like putting together what you were saying about
yeah,
um sometimes how you see things in a different way, or you were
yeah,
trying to create new things. I really wonder, and it's probably not something you even know the answer to, but if like having like that physical limitation kind of, and stuff that you maybe can't do so easily with your body,
mm,
your mind exercises itself more maybe, or like it's more playful in the ways that your body can't be sometimes, do you think?
yeah. I mean, it's definitely been a situation where it's allowed me to think like yes, there's certain physical things that I can't do, but my mind does kind of run wild and just think of all these random things to do. Like I feel like the creative energy that's running through me at this point in my life, and the thought process of like, okay, this is happening, blah blah, I have an idea for this. And then, like, once I have that idea, the next thing is like, okay, that's going to require a lot of physical aspects or attributes. How do I make that happen? Because obviously, I can do some things, but I can't do everything. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like the creative creative side of life has given me like where yes, when I was growing up I was a very active kid. I wish I would have became a baseball star or like whatever dream that young kids in the 90s growing up had, baseball star, football star, whatever. I wish I could have done that, but obviously I can't. And then once I kind of found my creative outlet in when I was in college doing video production, that leveled the playing field. Like it took my physical limitations and said, yes, in the video industry, in video film, whatever like specific avenue you take, there are certain things you're not necessarily going to be able to do or be able to do easily. But this is the great equalizer because there are other people that are good at videography or whatever it is that can help you and will help you. And that's been 15 years now, and I've been doing video production, yeah, for the last 15 years. So,
Wow. So what kind of like from school then going into what you guys call college, we call
yeah,
university.
yeah.
What kind of then led you to video specifically, do you think?
So this is a fun story. So at this point, this is my second semester in college. I had done some like video production in high school, but it was like very rudimentary, like PowerPoint that we embed video in, and it was like very rudimentary video editing. And I was like, that was kind of cool. That was kind of fun. And I was sitting at my buddy's place. I think we had just gotten done eating or something. And he throws out this idea. It's like, hey, what if we made a film? And I'm like, okay, what would we make it about? And at this time in my life, we were very big into bowling because where I grew up in South Chicago, bowling was like the thing. Like if you were a bowler, you were cool. Well, cool, so to speak. Uh, and so that was kind of our thing. And we did it we went bowling every day, all that stuff. It's like, what if we made a bowling film? Like, just like think Kingpin, but like a modern day Kingpin type situation. Are you familiar with the movie Kingpin?
No, I don't think I
Okay.
know.
So if you get a chance, if you like comedies, check out Kingpin.
I
It's a very
do.
good movie. Yeah.
I'm gonna watch it.
It's with Woody Harrelson and Bill Murray.
Oh,
Uh,
nice.
yeah. So it was like, what if we made a modern day Kingpin film? And I'm like, that sounds good. I don't know how to write a film script though. He's like, shoot, yeah, that is a problem. And I was like, hold on a minute. And I was picking out my college courses for the next semester. And this is back in the day where it was a thick book and you like physically had to fill. This was like right before not right before the internet became a thing, but right before like the internet became how you did things. So it wasn't like this was
Mm.
2006 probably. So yes, the internet was there, but like not a lot of colleges were like fully online at that point. And so I was thumbing through, I was like, hold on a second. I open up the book and I go to the index tab or whatever, and it's like, all right, writing. I was looking for the writing section. Okay, nothing about film. Film. Okay, let me see if we have a film section. So I go to the index and I find like film or meat. It said like film or media or something. And I'm like, okay, there it is. All right, go to that. Writing for TV and film. Bingo. Somebody's telling me something right there. I'm taking that. Oh, okay, that fits into my course schedule. I take that class. And it was like 2 months before before class started. And I was like, all right, I'm going to just start writing this film and whatever happens, happens. I'm going to go into this course. At worst case scenario, I'm going to be that guy that tries too hard as comes in with like a script already written. And so I write this film. And after like 3 weeks of this class, I go up to the teacher. I was like, hey, I took this class because I wanted to learn how to write film scripts. And at this time, we were just kind of doing like basic, like, we call it two-column writing, which is more for um, like advertisements, so like TV commercials and stuff. And he was like, okay, have you started writing or have you looked how to write film? And I was like, well, I started writing. I don't know if it's good or if it's in the correct format or anything like that. And so I hand him like a 20-page document that's just like a paragraph or like paragraphs of nonsense. And so it was almost like a book, but written very weirdly. And he's like, okay, this isn't in the right format, but I'll take a look at this and I'll kind of help you through this process. And I'm like, okay, sweet. And he comes back like 3 weeks later. He's like, okay, so at the end of this course, your final is you're going to write a script for a television show. So basically, whatever show you like to watch at the time, you're going to write a script for an episode, like an upcoming episode, and that will be the format that you want to convert this into. I'm like, okay, cool. And so I think that was him kind of trying to keep me from dropping the class. It was just kind of like, just like this, hey, we've only got like 13 kids. You drop this class gets canceled or whatever it is, one of those situations. But so I go through the class, I rewrite the script, and he's like, hey, you're a decent script writer. You should take my video production class next semester. And I'm like, ah, yes, let's do that. And so then from there, it was like, took his video production class, and he's like, hey, you passed this class, should take the video production two class. And I'm like, okay. So I took that one, and then he's like, it was my last semester. He was like, hey, I've got one more video production class for you. You need to take. And so it was just kind of like this slow, like luring me in type thing. And I was like, at that time, by then I had taken like three or four video production classes. And then he's like, hey, you should transfer to this other school that has a killer film program. And from there, it was off and run into the races.
Wow, it's kind of like an organic kind of
Yeah,
being led
100%. It was
into
like,
it.
it was like it was like leading me with breadcrumbs, like, hey, you're good here. So come take this class. I'd be a very, very, like, if I was Hansel and Gretel, in that old story, I'd probably be dead in a witch's brew or something. I don't know, but
But hey ho, here we are, and you're still making video. But
oh yeah,
between like the college bit and then live and amplified, you said earlier that you did some work in film.
yes. So when I graduated or while I was in college, I thought my path in all of this was I was going to be like in sports production. I thought I was going to do like work for like baseball teams or football teams and kind of doing their production stuff for like in-game stuff or television, like whatever it was. But I found out they didn't make a whole lot of money, so I needed to make a career shift because I wasn't going to spend the next 10 years making $28,000 a year. That didn't sound appealing to me. Like it,
Mm.
that's not a whole lot of money. And so I shifted to video or TV and started working in marketing and advertising. And so that took me out to Roswell, New Mexico, which had at the time had a flourishing or a blossoming because they were just kind of really getting started film scene because net up in Albuquerque, which is up in northern New Mexico, they had just signed a deal with Netflix to build a studios there. So they had all these um, big production companies moving to Albuquerque that were always looking for actors, film people, and so like there's a real emphasis on the New Mexico film scene. And so when I moved to New Mexico, I got introduced. One of the guys that was on my team for the marketing uh, department that I was working in, he was really big in the film scene. He was like, "Hey, man, if you ever want to come work on an independent film or any film in general, I can get you in. We'll figure out where we want to put you. Like where you want to go." Because at that time, I was just kind of like doing whatever I could. I didn't have like a specialty, right? And so I was like, okay, cool. And so I started getting involved in that and I started producing my own films because if you're producing everybody else's films but not producing your own, it's kind of like, what are we doing here? And so from there, I started getting involved in some bigger projects. I worked on or helped facilitate some stuff for some bigger projects that was on like the Hallmark Channel. So it was like a think it was a Christmas movie. I'm not 100% sure. Like I'd helped some buddies get hired onto that for like sound and stuff like that, and then I was lending out gear at so I was just kind of really getting involved in the film scene, and then I would start going up to Albuquerque, and I was started doing like extra work, which is like day playing actors. So if like you're in a big
Mm.
scene and they just need like people sitting on the bench, that's what I would do. but it was a really interesting moment because I was getting an insight look to an industry that unless I wanted to move out to Hollywood, that I wouldn't know because like I'm seeing how films are being produced. I'm seeing how things are happening. I'm working on student films. I'm working on independent productions. I'm working on big Hollywood films. It's it's a really cool experience. But then towards the end, like right around the time Live and Amplified starts picking up, I start noticing some things about the film industry that it's a lot of like a film I work on here. I work on a guy will bring me in to come shoot his film. Like so that would end up being kind of my emphasis. Like I'd come in and start shooting films. Like I'd be the videographer or the director of photography or whatever. Um, and I would put all this time and effort into people's films that weren't getting released. Like they would get it so far and then they would lose interest or the funding would dry up or whatever. And I'm like, well, that's not cool. Like we all put in so much effort into this film for it to not get released. That's kind of I don't know, that didn't sit right with me. And so
Mm.
it kind of started taking me out of the film industry because it's like I could put all because I started realizing I could put all this time and effort into film production or into these films doesn't mean it's going to get released. It could just sit on the shelf for the next 20 years and never see the light of day. And at that point, it's like, yeah, I got paid, but I want to see that film released, you know?
Mm.
So it jaded me on the film industry, or at least the Hollywood film industry. And so as Live and Amplified kind of started taking off, I was like, I don't need to work on other people's projects. I don't need to work in the industry. I'm building my own thing over here. And I every month I get to make documentaries. Yes, it's not like your fictional narrative stuff that like you would see at a movie theater, but at the core, I've always enjoyed telling other people's stories, documentaries, stuff like that. And at the beginning, that's what we were doing every month. We released 22 documentaries over the course of 2 years. So like if you think of
Wow.
it in that vein of like each episode that we did was its own documentary, we released 22 documentaries in 2 years. So
Wow.
it's like, and that's all stuff getting released. I have 100% control over it. So it was like that I don't need the film industry anymore because I can't guarantee every project or not every because I know some every once in a while some stuff will happen like oh this broke and we can't finish the film, like whatever it is.
Mm.
It's like okay, I get it. But when I'd done like 5 or 6 projects back to back and none of them got released, it's like okay, I'm done. I'm out. You guys are keep doing your thing or pretending to do your thing because it from my book it didn't seem like a lot of people were taking it seriously,
Mm.
if that makes sense. Sorry,
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
just
no,
went
it
on a
definitely does. I think like that actually happens in a lot of different like creative industries,
yeah,
especially like when it comes to the shinier things, the
yeah,
Hollywood, the big stage, the kind of
yep,
the big things that we're kind of taught that we're supposed to aspire to. You're
yeah,
supposed to aspire to work in Hollywood movies. Like that sounds so shiny and like
yeah,
amazing. But then the reality is, I think that that happens a lot because then they're so big and there's so many moving parts and it requires so much money
yep,
that they don't value that money maybe, or like it's easy to just be like, oh, do you know what, this is not going to happen, let's just move
yep,
on to the next thing, and not
yep.
really think about the amount of people's creative force, the
It-
vitality that's
yeah,
actually gone into creating
oh yeah,
that
because
thing.
it's one of those things where it's an industry, it's a money making industry. I 100% get that. And so at the end of the day, for these big companies to come in and say, "Oh, this film just isn't working," or "It's going to cost too much to fix whatever the issue is," we'll just make it a tax write off, and then they're good. And yeah, we all got paid, so like that's cool, that's fine. But at the end of the day, every project we work on is a business card in a lot of regards. So it's like when you're trying to get hired for the next project, they're going to ask, "Oh, what have you done recently?" And if I don't have anything to show them and saying, "Oh, yeah, I worked on this film," Oh, but it never got released. And at that point, it's like, okay, you worked on a bunch of films that never got released. You're not going to go anywhere. It's like, so
Yeah.
at that point, I was just kind of like, I appreciate the industry, but it's not the dream anymore. And so now I still do video production every day, every week, and it's fun, it's interesting, and yeah,
Yeah, or like you said earlier, it's something you actually have control over. Because I think a lot of creatives, like, we're kind of wired for things like anxiety a lot more than other
yep,
people, because a lot of our industries and a lot of the way that we work is actually
yep,
feels like it's completely out of our control.
yep,
It feels like it's in someone else's hands all the time. I say this a lot, especially for people that do work in like film, TV, actors, stuff like that, because
yep,
it does feel like you have to be cast by someone else, or someone has to
yep,
choose you to do this
yep,
thing, and you have to have this portfolio and all this stuff. But actually, when you realize that there is always something that you can have control over, whether that is taking control of your whole career in, creating your own thing that you're creating films
hmm
for or whatever. But also, even if you're listening to this and you don't feel like you do have that power, we always have control over our own
yep,
mindset.
yeah, 100%. And it's like just taking your own like that's why everything that we do, we try and remain independent because it's like if we're working on a film project or documentary or whatever it is, I'm the one that has the final say on it. Like I'm going to make sure it gets released, whether it's good or not. That's a different conversation for a different day. But I have control over it. I'm the one that's put all the money into it. I'm the one that's put 90% of the work into it. And so if it doesn't come out, yeah, that's on me. And it has, like, I'm not gonna lie, it has happened where, some things out of my control happen, and it's like, okay, well, I can't. There's nothing I can do about this, and it sucks every time it happens. But the sword lives and dies with me. Like the project lives and dies with me. So it's like I'm the one making the decisions. Is if I can't release a project, that sucks, and it hurts and all that stuff. But the only person I'm affecting is myself in a lot of regards.
Yeah,
So.
absolutely. I kind of like, I want to talk a little bit more about what's coming next for Live and Amplify. But before we
Yeah.
do that, I want to kind of, just for anyone that might be listening that's feeling somehow like held back in their creative journey, whether that
Yeah.
is because of something within them, like a disability or a limitation or
Mhm.
neurodivergence or whatever, or
Yeah.
if it's something more external, like financially held back or held back in the industry, what's like the number one piece of advice that you think you'd give to them?
It's all a mindset. It's all up here. If like I've met so many people that, hey, I've got this, or this is in the way, or I can't do that. And it's like, 100% understand. I know where you're coming from. I anything, well, not anything. A lot of the stuff you could tell me, I've probably dealt with in some capacity, right? At the end of the day, it's all a mindset. It's all how you approach it. It's all how can I how can I overcome these obstacles and just take, yes, there's limitations, whatever, but at the end of the day, you can do anything you want to do. Like it's as simple as that. Like there's a lot of things in my life that people told me I'd never be able to do, but because I didn't take their outside influence to affect my mindset, I still got it done. Like it all these outside voices, they're irrelevant. You know, you could take them for what they're worth. In my mindset, or anybody that says anything negative about anything I'm trying to do is an outside influence, and I don't let it get to me. So going back to, it's all mindset. If you want to get it done, you'll get it done.
Yeah, absolutely. I speak about that a lot because I think there's a lot of like external narratives, especially
Yeah.
about being a creative or living a
Yep.
creative life or having a creative job. The the narratives that are really outdated and complete rubbish, in my
Yeah.
opinion. And I think a lot of us subconsciously take them on as our own and don't
Yep.
realize that they're actually there until you sit and actually listen to what's going on in your head and kind of
Yeah.
choose to
Yeah.
believe otherwise, I think.
Yep. Yeah. Because it's like the one thing that I've learned kind of growing up is there's a lot of people like growing up, your friends, your family are going to influence the way you think. It's not necessarily how you want to view the world, but these outside narratives definitely have an impact on how we approach life, how we approach um, business ventures, creative ventures, like whatever. But at the end of the day, I think you need to really set all that aside, like we were saying, just push that all aside and go to the root of how you feel about the thing. I feel really weird just talking in general terms, but I'm trying my best, I promise. But yeah, it's just push all the outside of the narratives away and just go back to, okay, what do you honestly think? What do you honestly feel? And yeah, that I'm gonna just say it
Well,
again.
and
It's all mindset. So
yeah, and trusting that, I guess,
yep,
trusting what you feel rather than what
yeah,
other people tell you you should feel, you know?
yep. You said it better than I did. Thank you.
Okay, cool. And kind of going full circle in this conversation, we kind of started by saying it's coming up to 10 years of Live and
Yep.
Amplified. What's in store for the next 10 years, do you think?
Ooh, so it's funny because I just had this conversation with my business partner. I was like, hey, for the next 10 years, these are the mile markers we should try and hit. So next 10 years, we're definitely going to start focusing more on live in-person experiences. Um, because with like we can get into this conversation if you want to, but with the emergence of AI and stuff, I think my personal opinion is in-person experiences are going to be the next like big thing to boom. And
Mm.
I say that not that it isn't already a cool thing that people are trying to do, but like with the emergence of AI, it's going to be the great equalizer in a lot of creative outlets is if you can do it in person, that's going to be the thing. So, showcasing, continuing with our roots of showcasing and supporting independent musicians, independent singer-songwriters, um, but doing it in a more live aspect, like going out to breweries or listening rooms or clubs or like whatever venue will have us and start doing showcases. Now this is something that we've started doing over the last year and a half, but I think over the next 10 years that's going to be the big the big multiplier. Like we're going to start doing that pretty heavy over the next at least over the next 2 years. So
Mm. That's so funny you said that. I've had so many conversations in different capacities about that recently, whether it's because I'm also a yoga teacher, about everyone got really excited about online yoga. And now it's like, oh no, I actually miss being in person, or I was at a
yeah,
different thing last night that was more about coaching, and then people saying we
yep,
want to be coached. It was like it's the reversal of that whole internet AI
yeah,
boom thing,
yeah,
and everyone's really exhausted with the whole social media thing.
yeah.
I think.
Yeah. Well, and like not to say that AI isn't going to have its place in the creative world, because I think you were talking earlier about a lot of creatives being a little bit more introverted and interpersonal, and I think AI is going to help do some of the like the more mundane tasks of the creative world, like especially on this podcast. Imagine a world where AI handles 95% of your bookings. Like I know as a podcast host myself, that's the most tedious part of the job is like, okay, I gotta go find guests, I've got to go find this or whatever.
Yeah.
If AI can just kind of handle that because it is what it is, great. Like that makes my job so much easier. I can focus on the creative aspect of things.
Yeah, for sure. It can be a big energy saver, that is
Yeah.
for sure.
Oh yeah.
Awesome. I kind of want to come to the end with two questions that I'm
Okay.
asking everybody and just come with the first thing that comes to mind. The first question I've asked a few people actually in previous episodes, but that is if you can think of, and I asked this question because I think a lot of creators feel a little bit misunderstood sometimes, and it kind
Yeah.
of levels and kind of makes everyone kind of feel a lot more seen is what do you think is the biggest misconception either about you or about your work or you can say both.
The biggest misconception about me is that I'm gonna keep this clean that I am not a nice person. That is the biggest misconception
Really?
because a lot of people think because I don't have them on the podcast or I don't want to work with them or when I'm out, I'm always kind of in my like if I'm out at I found myself doing this yesterday because I was out at a songwriter festival a couple hours away from me and I found myself in my phone a lot of the time. Like I was just kind of like very insular in my own world, trying to get stuff done. And people thought I was being rude by not paying attention to the festival. And it's like, yes, I understand, but I'm here to work, not here to. Yes, I love listening to music, all that stuff. And so they thought I was being rude or mean or didn't care. And that I found that as kind of like a constant across my life because people um just see me out in public and I look like I'm unhappy or I look like I'm not having it or like because I have what they call RBF, which
Oh
is
yeah.
called yeah. I won't go any further on that one because you know what I'm talking about. And everybody just thinks I'm always unhappy or mean or whatever. And it's like, no, I've had several people tell me, like, yeah, you have like this rough exterior. And it's like growing up in South Chicago, I had to have a rough exterior. People had to think, oh, I don't want to mess with that guy because he's going to snap on me or whatever. And so, yes, that's a product of my upbringing. But at the core, I'm a nice guy. Like, we've only been talking for an hour, but if you called me in 3 weeks, say, hey, I'm in Texas, I need a place to go. 9 times out of 10, if I can't put you up somewhere I'm going to help you find a place. Like that's just the kind of
Mm.
guy I am. And I wish people knew that more about me. Yes, I'm nice and helpful, but I'm not going to get taken advantage of. But that's just kind of
Yeah,
that's a
that's just
difference.
having boundaries, and
Yeah.
boundaries are good,
But
good
I,
things.
but when we're friends and like somebody that I know and care for, or even somebody I don't really know, but I can tell that they're a good person, I'm going to move heaven and earth to try and help them any way I can. So.
Mm, awesome. For the record, I don't get that vibe from you at all.
Uh, Well,
Um,
I appreciate that. There's a lot of people that think, "Oh, he is like the worst person in the world," and it's like, no, I'm not. I
no
disagree. So,
way. Okay, the second question is if you think back to like some memorable conversations that you've had in your life, what was like the biggest or most helpful piece of advice anyone ever gave you? It could be about your career, it could just be about life.
going back to the conversation we had before about mindset. Um, so when I was first starting doing video production, the teacher that I was talking about that got, or the script writing teacher that kind of breadcrumbed me through into video production in a way. Um, 2 year or no, 4 years after I graduated, I got reached out by the school asking if they could do like a promo video with me to promote the video production department for the school as kind of like a recruitment tool. So that like, hey, you come to school here, take the video production class, you get to move on, or you can move on and do whatever you want to do. Kind of like one of those inspirational like promo things. And I was like, yeah, I'll be back in Chicago, whenever it was. And so we scheduled it, whatever. And I was sitting down talking with the teacher. At that point, I hadn't talked to him in like 4 or 5 years because after I graduated, we lost contact a little bit. Um, and we're just kind of sitting there doing the thing. He brought me in to talk to his class, and I remember when they were doing his interview, I was sitting right there. I was just kind of watching the interview, and he told like this isn't in the video or whatever, but he looked at me and he was like, "You just never stopped," and that's what I want people to learn from anything that I teach them, anything that you do, is the only person that's going to stop themselves from doing whatever they want to do is them. And it all goes back to the mindset. It was a
Mm.
very like it wasn't like I'm sure it was intentional to a degree, but it wasn't like a moment of like, hey, I'm going to give you your flowers. It was just like a very natural conversation where he was like, yeah, you just never stopped. Like, and I love that. I love that about you. So it's like, it was a very real moment of like, hey, whatever you do, just don't stop.
Yeah. Wow.
I don't know if that
Love
answered your
that.
question, but
It definitely did. No, I love that. It's definitely a great piece of advice and a good like moment also in
yeah,
your life to remember as
yeah,
well.
yeah,
Awesome. Well, Tom, this has been such a great conversation. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. I'll, of course, leave every link and all the stuff in the show
yeah.
notes for everyone to find you. But just in case anyone's poised and ready, where's the best place people can connect with you?
Yeah. So all of our social medias, if you just type in at live, LIVE, the letter N amplified, that should bring up that should bring us up on any social platform. So that's Facebook, Twitch, Twitter, Spotify, YouTube, Instagram, Threads, LinkedIn, all of the things. I'm trying to figure out where the new cool kids are hanging out right now. That's kind of been my adventure for the last couple of months, but I think for right now that's kind of the most of the places you could find us. So
I think the next cool kids will be in person.
yep, I 100% agree. That's going to be a throwback to the 90s where it's like, hey, I'm going to be here and we just hang out and do our thing. So
Yeah, I think definitely.
yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for listening. I hope you've enjoyed this show as much as I've enjoyed recording it. As always, leave us a comment or leave us a rating, review, all those things. It really does help out the show. But otherwise, have a great week and I'll see you next time. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Maverick Mind. I hope that you've loved it, and if you have, I would appreciate it so much if you would subscribe and write a 5-star review on wherever you're listening to this podcast from. If you'd like to keep the conversation going, I invite you to join me over on Instagram at maverickmindco or on my website maverickmind.elliefoden.com. And I'll see you in another podcast very, very soon.